My brother smirked across the dinner table and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You'll always be a renter. People like you don't buy houses." The laughter stung, but I didn't argue. I just sat there quietly, my hand brushing the folder in my bag, the one holding a signed deed he knew nothing about. 1 week later, the smirk would be gone. Before I dive into this story, hit like and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Your stories remind me I'm not alone. Growing up, there was always a spotlight in my family and it never landed on me. My brother Ethan was the golden child from the very beginning. Straight A report cards taped proudly to the fridge, the varsity jacket in the hallway, the applause at every graduation. I was the quiet one. The one who blended into the background. While he basked in praise, I was expected to clap along. And it didn't stop when we became adults. Ethan landed a cushy job in finance, bought a shiny SUV, and moved into a sprawling suburban house that became the family's favorite bragging topic. Every holiday, every barbecue, every birthday, my parents would gush over his mortgage payments and landscaping like he'd won an Olympic medal. Meanwhile, I rented a modest apartment, worked long hours at my marketing job, and side hustled whenever I could. "Don't worry, Emma's fine," Mom would say when someone asked about me. But her smile always held the same unspoken message. I wasn't Ethan. The truth was, I never cared about flashy cars or showing off. I cared about independence. I clipped coupons, packed lunches, skipped nights out, and saved every spare dollar. My coworkers teased me for drinking instant coffee instead of Starbucks, but I knew exactly what I was working toward. Still, to my family, I was invisible. At Sunday dinners, Ethan would ask with that smug grin, "So, Emma, how's the shoebox apartment? Still paying someone else's mortgage?" The table would laugh, my parents trying to soften it with awkward chuckles, but no one ever told him to stop. I learned to swallow the humiliation and keep my head down. What they didn't see were the late nights I spent crunching numbers, scrolling real estate listings, and building a future no one believed I could have. They assumed I was stuck where I'd always been, renting, struggling, second place. But the deed in my bag said otherwise. The jokes didn't stop. In fact, they got sharper. At every family dinner, Ethan found a new way to remind me I didn't measure up. "How's life in that shoebox? Don't forget to renew your lease before your landlord kicks you out." Jab was a pinprick. Small, constant, wearing me down. Mom would sigh, "Ethan." But her voice never had weight. Dad would chuckle and say, "Your brother's just teasing. Don't be so sensitive." Teasing. That was their word for it. But to me, it was public humiliation dressed as family banter. I learned to keep my face steady even when my hands wanted to shake. I told myself, stay quiet. Stay calm. But inside I was keeping score. Outside those dinners, my life looked very different from the one they mocked. I worked 2 jobs for years, skipped vacations, wore the same winter coat for 5 seasons. I saved until it hurt, every dollar tucked away. And finally, months ago, the impossible happened. I found a house. A small place on the edge of town with creaky hardwood floors and sunlight that spilled across the porch every morning. I signed the papers on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. My realtor handed me the keys and said, "Congratulations, homeowner." It should have been a moment shared with family. But I knew better. If I told them, Ethan would twist it, minimize it, make it small. So I kept it to myself. I held the secret close. Then came the night everything changed. We were gathered for Dad's birthday. Glasses clinking, conversation buzzing, the smell of roast chicken filling the room. I almost believed it would be a normal dinner. But Ethan never let an opportunity pass. He leaned back, smirked, and said it like a declaration. "You'll always be a renter, Emma. People like you don't buy houses." The laughter was louder than usual, crueler. My parents smiled tightly, embarrassed but unwilling to challenge him. Even my Aunt Caroline looked down at her plate. Something inside me hardened. For years I'd endured the jokes, the dismissals, the reminders that I wasn't enough. But this time was different. Because sitting there listening to their laughter, I wasn't powerless. The deed was already signed. The house was already mine. The folder was in my bag. I didn't say a word. I let Ethan have his moment, let their laughter fade. But as I gathered my coat and slipped the strap of my bag over my shoulder, I made a decision. I wasn't going to stay invisible anymore. The next dinner I wouldn't leave quietly. The next time Ethan smirked, I'd be ready. And when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't just wipe the smirk off his face. It would erase it completely. That night after Dad's birthday dinner, I went home and sat in the quiet of my apartment. The laughter replayed in my head like an echo. My brother's smirk. My parents' silence. Everyone letting it happen. For a moment the old version of me wanted to cry, to let the years of ridicule crush me. But then my eyes landed on the small silver key on my counter. The key to my new house. I picked it up, felt the cool metal press into my palm, and remembered exactly why I had fought so hard for it. It hadn't been easy. There were nights I came home so exhausted from my second job that I fell asleep at the kitchen table with a half-finished sandwich beside me. Winters when the heater rattled and wheezed, but I refused to call the landlord because every extra dollar mattered. Every extra dollar I earned needed to go into savings. Friends invited me to vacations, dinners, weekend trips, but I declined them all. My life was built on sacrifice, on discipline no one else ever saw. And in the end it paid off. That little house wasn't just a roof over my head. It was proof. Proof that their words about me being just a renter were nothing but noise. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the folder holding the deed. Smooth, official paper with my name in bold print. I traced the letters with my finger, letting the reality sink in. They thought they knew me. Thought I'd stay boxed in forever as the struggling sibling. But this paper was my weapon, sharp, undeniable. A plan formed in my mind. I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't argue. That had never worked. I'd wait until the next family dinner, wait for Ethan to open his mouth again, and then instead of shrinking I would let the truth speak for itself. I practiced it in my head, the calm way I'd sit, how I'd reach into my bag without a word, how I'd slide the folder across the table. I imagined the smirk melting off Ethan's face, the silence falling over the room, the stunned looks as they realized the person they dismissed had been building something all along. For the first time in years something shifted inside me. Not anger. Not fear. Control. The days leading up to that dinner felt different. I walked into work lighter, my head held higher. When Ethan sent his usual little jabs about my apartment or my cheap car, I didn't even flinch. Because I knew something he didn't. I knew the punchline to a joke he didn't realize was over. On the morning of the dinner I slipped the folder into my bag and zipped it shut with care. My hands didn't tremble this time. I wasn't carrying shame anymore. I was carrying proof. As I locked my apartment door and stepped outside I smiled to myself. Tonight the quiet sister wasn't going to stay quiet. Tonight the tables were going to turn. The dining room buzzed with the usual chatter, clinking glasses, the scrape of forks, the faint noise of a football game from the living room. The table was crowded with plates piled high, candles flickering. The kind of scene families romanticize. But for me it was always a stage for Ethan's show. He didn't wait long. "So Emma," he said, cutting into his steak. "How's life in the shoebox? Rent go up again? You know, you could have saved a lot of money if you just married someone with a house." The table laughed. My mother shook her head, muttering, "Ethan," but there was no real bite behind it. My father chuckled. Aunt Caroline pressed her lips together, clearly uncomfortable, but stayed silent. I set my fork down carefully. The clink was louder than I intended. My heartbeat stayed steady, not frantic, not panicked. Just steady. The folder in my bag felt heavier, like it was humming with its own energy. Ethan noticed my silence and smirked. "Figures. You've always been the quiet one. Some people just aren't cut out for ownership. And that's fine, Emma. Not everyone gets to win." I looked up, met his eyes, and finally spoke, my voice calm, almost soft. "You're right, Ethan. Not everyone gets to win." Then I reached into my bag. The room fell quiet as I pulled out the folder, placed it gently on the table, and slid it across the linen toward him. "You might want to take a look before you finish that thought." He frowned, annoyed at the interruption, and flipped it open. At first he smirked, as if expecting some lease renewal or irrelevant paperwork. But then his eyes caught the bold black letters. "Deed of ownership." His smirk collapsed. What is this?" he muttered, scanning the page. "It's my house," I said simply. "Closed last month. Keys are in my bag." The silence was electric. Aunt Caroline gasped and leaned forward to read. My mother blinked rapidly, trying to process it. My father set his fork down, jaw tightening. Ethan's face flushed red. You bought a house. You." "Yes," I answered, steady. "And I didn't need to tear anyone down to do it." The air shifted. No one laughed. Even the TV in the background seemed to fade. My mother finally spoke, voice trembling. Emma, why didn't you tell us? I shrugged. Because every time I tried to share anything, it turned into a punchline. The words landed hard. Even Dad looked away ashamed. Ethan tried to recover, his voice sharp. So what? One little house doesn't make you successful. You probably overpaid. Probably some dump. I didn't rise to it. Right then my phone buzzed on the table. Caller ID lit up. Realtor Sarah. I pressed speaker. Hi Emma, Sarah said warmly. Just confirming everything's squared away with the utility transfers for your property. Congratulations again on your new home. Perfect timing. I thanked her, hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Ethan's fists clenched on the table. His smirk was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen from him before. Fear. Not of me. Of what I represented. Proof he wasn't untouchable. Proof his version of me had been a lie. Aunt Caroline broke the silence first. Emma, that's incredible. I'm proud of you. Her words cracked the tension. My mother still looked stunned. My father looked grim. But no one dared laugh now. Ethan shoved his chair back so hard it scraped the floor. This is ridiculous, he snapped, storming out. The front door slammed. The echoes faded. I stayed seated, calm, hands folded neatly in my lap. For once I wasn't invisible. For once the room wasn't laughing at me. And the best part? I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't begged for respect. I had simply placed the truth on the table, black and white, undeniable. The following week I stood on the porch of my new house, keys cool in my hand. The neighborhood was quiet, lined with maple trees swaying in the breeze. I turned the lock, pushed open the door and stepped inside. Fresh paint. Polished wood. Sunlight pouring in through wide windows. Peace. I wandered through each room, imagining the life I'd built here. Every corner whispered the same thing. This isn't rented. This isn't borrowed. This is mine. My phone buzzed again, Ethan. For the first time in my life I felt no obligation to answer. I let it ring and walked out to the backyard. The grass was uneven, a little wild, but beautiful. And in that moment, I realized the real victory wasn't humiliating Ethan, or proving my parents wrong. It was standing here in this space I earned with sacrifice and persistence, knowing my worth had never belonged to them. Families can be brutal in ways strangers never could. They know exactly where to hit. And for years I let those hits land. But sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting back. It's building something undeniable and letting the truth speak for itself. I didn't embarrass my brother. He embarrassed himself when the papers hit the table. And in that silence I finally understood something powerful. My worth was never theirs to define. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, or made to feel small by people who should have lifted you up, know this. You're not alone. Drop a comment and share your story because someone out there needs to hear it.